St. Joseph.
St. Joseph, yes. Good afternoon to everybody. With a short delay, we can start with our afternoon workshop session number 2, the place of the Catholic intellectual tradition in today's university. Welcome to all of you. Thank you for being with us. My name is Željko Tanjić, and I am the rector of the Catholic University of Croatia in Zagreb and member of FIUC board, and I'm going to chair this workshop. I'm delighted to greet among us the participants of this workshop, Reverend Stephen Morgan, FIUC Vice President and Rector of the University of St. Joseph, Macau, China, Professor Sigrid Müller, Institute of Systematic Theology and Ethics, University of Vienna, Austria, Dr. Father Joseph C.C., Vice Chancellor of Christ University, India, and Father Salim Dakash, Jesuit Father, Rector of the University St. Joseph, de Beirut, Lebanon. The procedure is, as usual, our colleagues will have 15 minutes on disposal for their presentation. After that, they will have also 5 minutes each if they need to exchange their opinions about their lectures or something to add to their own ideas. And then we will go to the questions from you or from my side to this floor. Before we start, let me just briefly say some remarks like introduction. Actually, when I was listening to workshops yesterday and even our meeting organized by Sacro Cuore this morning, it was clear to me that they all spoke about Catholic intellectual tradition in different ways. And I think that we had really good start and that all these interventions are enrichment of those ideas that we heard even this morning, and I'm very grateful for that. But it's clear to us, I believe to all of us, that we can distinguish between the Catholic intellectual tradition and the Catholic doctrinal tradition. As much as they may be really intrinsically linked, they should nevertheless be distinguished. I'm not going to talk even about doctrinal tradition of the Church, not explaining what is intellectual tradition. But during our meeting, we have seen that we can, I hope, all agree that Catholic intellectual tradition is the attention and it pays to the formation of whole human being, and especially to the spiritual moment in that person's act of cognition, learning, teaching, research. And this spiritual moment is always realized as life in accordance with chosen values. So we are going to hear how our colleagues are thinking about this Catholic tradition, intellectual tradition from their point of view, because we have different, not only geographical areas, but also cultural areas, different experiences in the church, in the education and intellectual tradition at their own universities. We will start with Father Reverend Stephen Morgan, just a short biography. Stephen Morgan, good friend, has been rector of the University of St. Joseph since 2020, having been the Dean of the Faculty of Religious Studies there since 2018. Originally from Wales in the United Kingdom, you will hear such a beautiful British accent. And I'm always ashamed when I speak next to him, my poor pidgin English. He's an associate professor of theology and ecclesiastical history. After a career in finance in the city of London and Hong Kong, he spent 15 years as the senior executive of a large non-for-profit in the United Kingdom. Returning to academic work in 2009, he read for PhD in theology at the University of Oxford, where he was a postdoctoral research associate of St. Bennett's Hall between 2013 and 2015. He has been a member of the academic staff of Marywell Institute of Higher Religious Science since 2019. In August 2022, he was elected Vice President of the International Federation of Catholic Universities. The same month, he was also elected President of the Executive Secretariat of the Association of Southeast Asian Catholic Colleges and Universities. And he's also a board member of the Association of Universities of Asia and the Pacific. Stephen, the floor is yours.
Željko, thank you very much indeed. I want to begin this short intervention by making a bold claim, one that is certainly not immune from serious challenge, one that hardly fits the various nostrums of contemporary secular society, anti-colonialist rhetoric, or for that matter, the self-denying anti-triumphalism that has marked the post-conciliar church. It is a claim, however, that I think can be sustained within certain limits, although that's not the purpose of this paper, and one which provides a useful foil, a limited working hypothesis, if you like, for what I want to say about the Catholic intellectual tradition and the university. The claim is this: the university is a Catholic thing. That is to say, without the Catholic faith, indeed without the Catholic Church, there would be nothing resembling what we now know as a university, and that a university better approaches its ideal insofar as, and only insofar as, it is a Catholic institution. In part, I begin with such a bold, even outrageous statement. One of my colleagues in Macau called it deliberately inflammatory, because I want to reflect upon the purpose of higher education, the purpose of the university within a context that respects its origins, as well as pointing towards what might look like its final cause, in which all its formal potentialities are enacted, or perhaps, to adopt the language of Plato, in which it so participates in the idea of a university that it best approximates to that idea. The claim is, therefore, that the more a university is truly Catholic, the more it is truly a university. I think the reverse is also true. Wishful thinking, the stretching of classifications, and the manipulation for religio-political reasons aside, it's a matter of historical record that the first universities that are in any way recognizable to us today, that is, of communities of masters and students gathered together under a common rule to pursue the discovery and dissemination of knowledge, these first universities emerged in Europe in the 11th century out of a context that was entirely ecclesial. Of course, even the suggestion of some kind of separation between the sacred and the secular, the religious and the civic, in the Middle Ages is somewhat anachronistic. So all-persuasive was the influence of Catholic Christianity at the time. But it's safe to say, I think, that in its origins and purposes, the university is a creature of Catholic Christianity. The early history of universities is fascinating. For example, we see in Nuce what Newman would later call the note of early anticipation. Many of the characteristics of modern universities, that is, were there right at the beginning. Self-government, ecclesial oversight, ever-widening pursuit of knowledge and fields of study. Nevertheless, for the present purposes, it's enough to recognize these origins and to note that the advancement of true religion as a concomitant of the advancement of other knowledge, expressed even today in the purpose clauses of, for example, the colleges of my own alma mater Studiorum, the University of Oxford, was recognized as well then as it was in Newman's idea of a university, and as it is now in the mission statements and mottos of today's Catholic universities. It is then those universities who have become or were founded as secular establishments that are departures from the norm, deficient in their proposal of an academy cut off from the pursuit of not merely truth, but the truth. If universities are, as I claim, Catholic in nature, then the question of what the intellectual elements of that Catholic nature are requires addressing. At first pass, a concept with such a catchy name as Catholic intellectual tradition might offer us, we might reasonably hope, some indications as to how we might answer it. Unfortunately, I think what is normally referred to as the Catholic intellectual tradition is of little practical use to us. The term as it is commonly used is of surprisingly recent coining. As late as 2013, Cyril Orshi claimed that the term, quotes, Catholic intellectual tradition exists only really in English, close quotes. And he cited a paper given by Wolfgang Grassel entitled, Is There Really a Catholic Intellectual Tradition? Given at the American Academy of Religion conference in November 2009, in support of the assertion that, quotes, the term is not found in Italian, German, Polish, French, or Spanish. Its equivalent in those languages is probably Catholic thought, close quotes. Indeed, a brief search of online sources finds the first use of the German term Tradition katholischer Intellektualität as late as 2016, where the term is expressly disavowed as being sectarian, contrary to the German intellectual tradition, and even a product of an anachronistic Eurocentrism. The author of that first German article went so far as to claim, quotes, in German-speaking countries, such a title rather provokes irritation. Isn't intellectuality as a claim of holistic world interpretation an anachronism anyway? And does an insistence on Catholic intellectuality not succumb too easily to the temptations of particularistic milieu formation and then only have a polarizing effect, close quotes. Of course, we should note that the German term Intellektualität refers to a disposition of mind, intellectuality in English perhaps, rather than to a thing, a tradition. And the term Catholic intellectuality has a much older but politically charged history in the German Academy. A similar search in Italian sources produces no use of the term before 2018, and that in an article written by an American. The term is all but absent from French sources, where what is much more visible is the notion not of a Catholic intellectual tradition, but of the Catholic intellectual, viewed positively or negatively, depending upon prior intellectual and political commitments. So given this background, it's perhaps important to consider where the term sprang from in the English-speaking world, and whether the circumstances of its appearance are so particular as to make the term all but unusable apart from that context. Paul Sullins argues that the term developed in the American Catholic Academy against the background of a sense that, quotes, at issue is whether Catholic institutions of higher learning are likely to succumb or have already succumbed to the attenuating forces of secularization that evaporated the religious distinctiveness of mainline Protestant educational institutions a century ago, close quotes. The history of claims of secularization are often difficult to disentangle from issues of ecclesial politics. It is, however, a matter of record that Protestant institutions in the English-speaking world did undergo a measure of attenuation of religious character in the face of secularization, even in those universities of original, if now historically distant, Catholic origins. For example, once again, the University of Oxford dropped the requirement that graduates be communicant members of the Church of England in the 1870s, the requirement for all undergraduates to pass an examination in divinity in the 1920s, and compulsory, albeit infrequent, attendance at chapel at much the same time. In the period after the Second Vatican Council, and often catalyzed by the reception or non-reception of Humanae Vitae, this question of secularization, especially in North America, became tied up with issues of academic autonomy and freedom, understood in a highly culturally specific manner, which perhaps owed more to the constitutional and political history of the United States than it did to Catholic theology. They became even more pronounced following Pope St. John Paul's Ex Corde Ecclesiae, and have certainly fed into the so-called Catholic culture wars of the first quarter of the 21st century. So much so, in fact, that I would argue that taking our lead from North America in our understanding and use of the term Catholic intellectual tradition is almost entirely unhelpful to us, particularly to those of us who struggle to understand what is distinctly Catholic about the intellectual and academic lives of our university in those parts of the world where Catholicism is not a faith in full-blown retreat in the face of secularization, but is instead a missionary faith in societies where the influence of Christianity has been at best marginal. Should we then dispose of the term altogether and try and find a better one? I would argue not, because the term can reasonably be used to articulate something that is precisely ordered towards the nature. Am I speaking too quickly?
Don't worry, we will give you some additional minutes. Don't worry.
Let me tell you, if I was speaking in Welsh, it would be even faster.
That's great. No, just don't worry. We have time. We have time.
Maybe I could have a second job as a racing commentator on horse racing. Probably pays better than being a rector. I'll go back a sentence for the benefit. I'm sorry. I love simultaneous interpreters. You've such a hard job. I would argue that taking our lead from North America in our use and understanding of the term Catholic intellectual tradition is almost entirely unhelpful to us, particularly to those of us who struggle to understand what is distinctly Catholic about the intellectual and academic lives of our universities in those parts of the world where Catholicism is not a faith in full-blown retreat in the face of secularization, but is instead a missionary faith in societies where the influence of Christianity has been at best marginal. Slow enough? Slower yet. I'm not sure I can breathe between each word. Should we then dispose of the term altogether and try to find a better one? I would argue not, because the term can reasonably be used to articulate something that is precisely ordered towards the nature of a university as an essentially Catholic enterprise, and one which accordingly serves a missionary purpose, a university that goes forth to witness to the joy of the gospel, to adopt the vocabulary of the current pontificate. A religion that is so fundamentally committed to the notion of the incarnation, that God became man in Jesus Christ for our salvation, and which has adopted the theologically and philosophically rich language of logos to express something of its understanding of God, is a religion that seeks to offer an account of reality that is precisely ordered and rational, one that is a cosmological account, not a chaotic one. The idea of logos as expressing something of the divine is not entirely unique to Christianity. Indeed, in the Taoist account that has been so influential in East Asia, Tao itself can be understood as not simply an idea, but as having something of divine personality about it. Nevertheless, the idea that the ordered principle of all that is not merely itself divine, but has become man, and in his manhood has wrought the restoration of man, and indeed the whole cosmos, is unique, at least in the manner in which it's been worked out in Catholic theology in its Trinitarian and Christocentric and therefore cruciform fullness. This claim that all that there is can be understood as ordered, rational, coherent, free from essential contradictions and chaos, is also a bold one. It is perhaps, though, worth remembering that the account of creation that we have in sacred scripture is one that is at least committed to the idea of order being brought out of chaos as it is to the idea of creation ex nihilo. Such an account of reality is, I would suggest, at the very heart of how we might want to understand the term Catholic intellectual tradition, and why Georges Lemaitre and Gregor Mendel are as much examples of that tradition as are Augustine, Aquinas, Georges Bernanos, Graham Greene, Ephraim the Syrian, and Dante Alighieri. In this Catholic understanding, the human intellect, which in its participation in the Logos, through which and in the image and likeness of which it was made, seeks always to understand and so offer an ordered account of reality, and in so doing, it seeks to be holistic and not eclectic. As a properly Catholic intellectual tradition, it is one which rejects an account of reality, which understands different aspects of that reality as self-contained, distinct, sufficient in themselves, in favor of seeing them as interconnected expressions of an ultimately inexhaustible and infinite reality, which is itself one, true, good, and beautiful. That is to say, a truly Catholic intellectual tradition is one which seeks to give an account for its own sake and ours of God. It is here, I think, that the idea of a Catholic intellectual tradition, one directed towards what John Henry Newman called universal knowledge, has something useful to say to us, not just in the sense of offering some indications of what it is and where it is to be found in its various expressions, but something which speaks to the purposes of universities understood as I rather provocatively claimed them to be at the beginning of this paper. As so often with abstract concepts, it's easier to say what the Catholic intellectual tradition is not than to say what it is. So let me commence my closing remarks with saying what I think it is not. I do not believe that any real and meaningful, not to say practical and useful notion of the Catholic intellectual tradition can be understood in terms of some retrospectively constructed selection of thinkers whose particular concerns happen to align with our own position in the ongoing interaction between Catholicism and secular postmodernity, any more than I think it refers to an assertion of personal and institutional autonomy which would set up what we might call, again to borrow a term from Newman, private judgment against the truths of divine revelation and the Church's magisterium. I must put my cards on the table here. I view the former construction as prone to a self-serving, intellectually myopic tunnel vision, and the latter view is almost always grounded in an attempted post hoc justification of dissent, usually these days related to issues of personal sexual morality. So what can we say positively? When Pope St. John Paul issued the encyclical letter Fides et Ratio, the initials, FR, by which the document was often referred, was amusingly referred to by not a few of us as standing for Fisichella and Ratzinger, the supposed authors of the document. My own work in the last few years, however, has made me more familiar with John Paul II's own academic work, particularly as it so often complements and offers a Thomistic personalist account of things that I know well from Newman and his rather different approach. I wouldn't want to ignore the possibility of the hands of Archbishop Fisichella and our late lamented Pope Benedict in the overall structure of the encyclical. I would now, however, claim that it was only Papa Wojtyła who could have written the opening sentence of that document, a sentence which expresses best for me the activity in which a Catholic intellectual tradition consists, the purpose to which such a tradition must be orientated, and the scope of that enterprise, the space for which only a university properly conceived, and therefore a Catholic university, can genuinely afford. So let me end by reminding you of that lapidary opening definition of the activity, purpose, and enterprise that is the Catholic intellectual tradition. Faith and reason are like two wings on which the human spirit rises to the contemplation of truth, and God has placed in the human heart a desire to know the truth, in a word, to know himself, so that by knowing and loving God, men and women may also come to the fullness of the truth about themselves. That, for me, is the Catholic intellectual tradition. Thank you.
Dear Stephen, thank you very much. And you, at the beginning, in the middle of your presentation, said that the term Catholic intellectual tradition is almost entirely unhelpful to us. I was asking myself, what are we doing here? But then you did find a way out of this claim. So thank you for your really important thoughts and vision of Catholic intellectual tradition, bringing us at the end back to Fides et Ratio. I'm sure that your lecture is going to be a source of many, many questions after our presentation. So thank you once again, and I hope that our friends who have done a translation, they survived. So thank you once again for that. So we are going on with Professor Sigrid Müller. I'm so happy that she's here. She's the only lady in this panel, but she's a great lady, so I'm so happy that she's with us. Professor Sigrid Müller is professor at the University of Wien, Vice Dean for Research of the Catholic Theological Faculty at the University of Vienna. She studied theology, Latin, and Italian at Tübingen and at the Pontifical University, Gregorian University at Rome. She holds also a master's degree in family counseling from the Catholic University of Salamanca. Her special research interests are the history of moral theology and bioethics with a focus on the ethics of technology. In 2008, she was appointed a junior member of the Austrian Academy of Science and a member of the curatorial board of the Austrian Science Fund für die wissenschaftliche Forschung. For the years 2011-2013, she has been elected president of the European Society for Catholic Theology. Professor Müller, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for this kind introduction. And well, I think I will be a bit different in tone, and it will be a very interesting discussion afterwards, you know, so where we seem to develop similar ideas and where we are looking at the question from different perspectives. So I would like to start by saying that a few days ago in my prayer app, I found the following words: Lord, make us open to new things and help us to preserve the good old things. So to me, when I read that, I thought, okay, this fits very well to what I need to say. So it seemed to summarize the attitude which is needed in our use of the Catholic intellectual tradition. I use the term, I'm very happy for your qualifications that we have heard already, because it fits to observations that I have made in the field of moral theological and philosophical history, to which we refer in our studies of Catholic theology. I'm a member of the University of Vienna in Austria, and I need to explain maybe that this is a state university with a full Catholic theological faculty integrated into it, where we grant state degrees and as well church degrees. So we teach the future clergy, they study with us, And we teach also lay people and offer courses also which are eligible for students of other faculties, among which are philosophy, psychology, sociology, and nursing studies, for example. Just to give you a background, against which I'm speaking now. So, having said this, it's clear that I'm here on the panel because I'm speaking as a representative of Europe, and maybe also of the West, though I'm aware of the differences between European and American approaches, at least to a certain respect. And I'm speaking to you also as a moral theologian. As a moral theologian who is very much interested in modern ethical challenges, as has been said in bioethics, but as a moral theologian who also loves history of moral theology, especially the late Middle Ages and everything that is written in Latin. So because of this combination, my heart beats faster when I see traces of the past in the present discussions. And you will forgive me when I start by making a stance in favor of the importance of the intellectual tradition. But I would like to make 3 points. So I start with, taking up the cudgels for intellectual tradition. But second, I would like to show that doing intellectual history cannot be done without unfolding a dynamic way of looking at the world. So to me, it's nothing past and, rigid, but creating dynamism. And third, I will briefly present what I perceive today as the challenges for our understanding of Catholic theological tradition, and which stimulates us to think in new ways. So, first point, why Catholic intellectual tradition? I use this term now. I'm speaking in English, so it's fine, I think. Why is it important? So the attitude presented in the prayer, namely to open up to new things and preserve the good old things, already shows that we are challenged by new things to interpret present reality through our faith. And by doing so, we already transform our intellectual tradition. Dealing with our Catholic intellectual tradition means examining the Church Fathers, the medieval intellectuals, the early modern experts on universal reason and individual discernment, law theories, formal discussions with empiricists and philosophers of the Enlightenment, and later with psychology and sociology, and up to postmodern philosophy. By engaging in history, we see how new things were discovered at different epochs. They were compared with the old ones, and the theologians discussed ways in which the new ideas could be added or integrated in what we today can label as Christian tradition. Engaging with Catholic intellectual tradition is at the same time doing intellectual tradition, because it is a constant movement between what we perceive in the present and interpret as new, and what we label as old just because it belongs to the history. So there is a back and forth all the time. But when we look back in history, we detect that Catholic intellectual tradition is not a cord made of threads that are all equally long and all date back to the beginnings in the Bible. Rather, we discover that our tradition is made of many threads which are of different length. Some entered into the cord at a specific time in history and might also have come to an end at another period in time, as the cord continues growing along the history of the Church. So why is this observation important? When we do intellectual history in our classes of moral theology, history of philosophy, but also in all theological fields, when they look back in time, we try to understand how Christians interpreted the challenges of their time in the light of faith. With new material, they integrated, they found, and they combined it together with what they deemed to be the good old things which they wanted to carry on with, so that the cord was at least partially renewed. there are many advantages of doing intellectual history. It helps us to become aware of the richness of our faith tradition, and of the faith of former Christians. We learn about traditions which we seem to have forgotten. Sometimes we learn to our surprise that what we think is most typical of our Christian tradition consists in reality of a thread which is much shorter than we thought. I remember very well when I first learned in my studies that marriage has not been there forever a sacrament, that it is only since the 15th century that marriage has been regarded for sure a sacrament. There have been discussions before. So, and another example are the normative systems in moral theology. If we look back, we discover the rich virtue tradition, virtue ethics tradition, which we would not see when we only regard the past decades of our teaching theology. So we learn to know the varieties that have existed. We learn about women who baptized other women. We learn that there were arguments used that we wish to never use again regarding conversion and whether these people should live or not if they were sinners. And we learn about things changing slowly but steadily. And this brings me to my second point. Doing intellectual tradition enables us to understand it as dynamic, as a dynamism, and understand also our reality, our presence as dynamic. All these discoveries, they are encouraging. They encourage us to take responsibility for tradition in our present times. Just as our fellow Christians in the past, we are entitled to search for new threads that we think we should weave into the cord of our tradition, and to reflect on what we think should be maintained. When we do intellectual history, we get amazed with how closely and seriously medieval theologians engaged with all academic and scientific knowledge that they came across, and also with other faith traditions and philosophies. If you think about the Islamic tradition of philosophy, that they were assuming, that they were discussing, that they were thinking about and reflecting what can be integrated, what is wrong, what would they see otherwise, all the vision of the nature, they took everything on and they reflected it in the light of their faith. If you take these medieval people as examples, this takes away any fear of encounter with what is contemporary and challenging, foreign, stimulating thought. Theology stands for the capability of looking closely at reality in the light of the gospel. It means taking life seriously and interpreting it. Here is also where the dialogue with natural sciences comes in. If we remember St. Albert the Great and Thomas Aquinas in the past, they engaged with all this scientific knowledge as they had it at their times and interpreted the life. All our surroundings, all the people we are talking to are impregnated by the recent developments in science. So also our faith needs to speak to people who are facing this reality. In this way, engaging with past intellectual discussions between Christianity and culture helps us to rediscover the dynamism which is inherent in Catholic intellectual tradition. And it is this dynamism that keeps faith alive. As I read once sprayed on a wall in Vienna, tradition is not about passing on the ashes, but the embers. Could I say the fire? So I'm coming to present challenges. When we engage with present discussions and ideas so that the glowing embers can turn into a flame, a new question needs to be asked, which was brought up in yesterday's discussion. New research approaches, as for example, postcolonial studies and intersectionality, challenge an understanding of our Catholic intellectual tradition as it was understood for a long time. They point the finger at the fact that Christian intellectual tradition reads first and foremost as a predominantly European history. Is the European intellectual history tradition still the only key of interpretation for today's Christian approaches? As the developments of the most recent meeting on the Synod on Synodality has shown, if we look at numbers, the center of the Church is shifting to the global South. If we recall this global distribution of Christianity, why have we, I'm asking myself, during my studies in theology, why have we, maybe because I studied too little time in Rome, I don't know, but at least at that time, why have we heard so little about the history of Eastern Christianity, which is as old as our Western tradition? How far have we got in integrating the history of the missions in the countries and continents who have embraced Christianity in more recent centuries? And more important, if we recall the image of threads that form the core of Christian intellectual tradition, we need to ask ourselves, how should we integrate the threads of non-European traditions? Or which would be a more radical question, is there and should there be, in the light of the different developments, still one single core of Catholic intellectual tradition? Or would it be more exact to imagine the Church and its intellectual tradition rather as assuming the shape of a many-armed octopus? The head is the Church, comprising also all the institutions of Catholic education, which means a church. As a church, we can only swim if we learn to develop the different chords and learn to move the different chords together. So this would be the other picture. This is not something that came up to my mind, and I'm very curious to discuss that with you. So why should we not just cut some threads and integrate all into one? So the answer to this question depends probably also on how we perceive of the human being. As one of my doctoral students from Malta, who is writing his doctoral thesis on Veritatis Gaudium and the theology of the Mediterranean formulated, it depends on whether we see the Holy Spirit operating in the human being only as a spiritual, in the sense of intellectual force, or whether the encounter with Christ is more precisely seen as incarnational. Not abstract ideas, but life itself as it is lived in the different places of the world is where the encounter of grace and reality takes place. Catholic tradition from this point of view is not only an intellectual tradition, but a tradition manifesting the incarnational dimension of our faith, and therefore encompasses many differently shaped cultural expressions. So therefore, I think that the greatest challenge for Catholic intellectual tradition today is the question of how we want to understand it, and that we still know it very partially. In many continents, I think it is still in the making.
Thank you very much, Professor Miller. At the end, I really think that you and Stephen have something in common, but maybe with different understanding what it means, Catholic intellectual tradition and incarnational principle and so on. So I think discussion is going to be very, very interesting. Thank you for these 3 steps to in Catholic tradition, dynamic of Catholic intellectual tradition, and also challenges that we have today in Catholic intellectual tradition. So as I said, I'm sure that discussion is going to be very, very fruitful. Our third participants here is Dr. Father Joseph C.C., Vice Chancellor of Christ University in Bangalore in India. Since assuming the role of Vice Chancellor at Christ University in 2023, Father Joseph has played a pivotal role in steering the institution toward excellence. His journey within the university has been marked by significant leadership roles, including Pro-Vice Chancellor and Director of Student Service. Notably, Father Joseph has held key positions such as a Director of the Center for counseling and health service, as well as leadership role in the Department of Sociology and Social Work. Father Joseph actively immerses himself in research across a spectrum of disciplines, including maritime history, organizational culture, work values in educational institutions, and maritime relations. He's currently leading a major research project on organizational culture, work values, and organizational performance in the institution of higher education in South India. He holds a master's degree in history from Maharaja Sayarao University, Borda, Gujarat, and a PhD from Pondicherry University in India. Beyond his academic history and career, he is a proud member of the Carmelites of Mary Immaculate Congregation. So, Father Joseph, we are happy that you are with us. The floor is yours.
Good afternoon, everyone. In the spirit of Ex Corde Ecclesiae, every Catholic university, as a university, is an academic community which, in a rigorous and critical fashion, assists in the protection and advancement of human dignity and of a cultural heritage through research, teaching, and various services offered to the local, national, and international communities. This advancement of human dignity will be meaningless if it is without the reference to truth. The document underlines this when it states that it is the honor and responsibility of a Catholic university to consecrate itself without reserve to the cause of truth. This is pointed out as an urgent need, namely of proclaiming the meaning of truth, that fundamental value without which freedom, justice, and human dignity are extinguished. The place of Catholic thought in contemporary India, which I am asked to reflect about, continue to be relevant as ever. Beginning with missionaries and taken forward with the visionary leaders like Saint Kyriakos Elias Chavara, the founder of the Carmelites of Mary Immaculate, the first Indian religious congregation founded in 1831, an inspiration of Christ University. Catholic educational institutions have made a lasting impression on academic thought in India. For instance, Saint Kyriakos Elias Chavara's vision of inclusive education by bringing together students from lower and higher castes, varied economic backgrounds, was a revolutionary step in the context of 19th century India. The spirit of inclusive and holistic education is carried forward by Catholic educational institutions spread along the length and breadth of India. Contemporary India is marked by the youthfulness of its population. According to UN population report of April 2023, 50% of the population is under the age of 25. To Andrea Wojner, the representative of United Nations Population Fund in India, and I quote, "India is at a unique historic opportunity, witnessing a great demographic transition as a youthful nation. On the other hand, India also experienced the growth of religious fundamentalism and intolerance. The Catholic academic institutions have added responsibility to form and transform the young people. Mahatma Gandhi, the father of the nation, reminds us, and I quote, "Man is neither mere intellect, nor the gross animal body, nor the heart and soul alone. A proper and harmonious combination of all the three is required for making the whole man and constitute the true economics of education." And fortunately, let me also compare with Mahatma Gandhi with International Federation of Catholic Universities. Our president, Dr. Isabel, said it's in 1924 that IFCU got founded. In fact, Mahatma Gandhi, after getting released from the prison by the Britishers in 1924, vigorously started the non-violent movement, Satyagraha. The non-violence became very meaningful to him and took with great pride and responsibility the movement. My presentation consists of two parts. In the first, I will outline the major features of the Catholic intellectual tradition. And in the second part, I'll apply these features in the Indian Catholic and in the particular context of Christ University. The major features of the Catholic intellectual tradition, as we all know, consist of faith and reason, commitment to truth, human dignity and common good, interdisciplinary inquiry, dialogue with different cultures, service, and social justice. The part two, I am applying these features in the Indian Catholic tradition in a university like ours, with a focus on whole person education. The Catholic universities need to emphasize again and again the holistic, the integral development of students, as we used to say, focusing on three aspects: intellectual, soul, and mind. Let me reflect some of these aspects in our context. Starting with intellectual, the first of the aspects to reflect is academic excellence through interdisciplinary training. And for us in India, we have adopted for the last 2 years a new policy in education known as National Education Policy of 2020, which emphasizes on multidisciplinary training, research, entrepreneurship, and innovation. The second aspect of this reflection is about moving from information to wisdom. And the third aspect is the social impact initiatives. And very proud to say that our Catholic institutions in India advanced in taking initiatives for social sensitization. For example, in Christ University, we have a large number of students who are volunteers in Center for Social Action in all our 6 campuses. And as a result of which, we could see indirectly we are taking up evangelization. Indirectly, we reach to all the students from different religious backgrounds the need of reaching out to the other. So, with Center for Social Action, Christ University works towards assisting marginalized communities, providing services such as education for the underprivileged by the volunteers giving tuitions in slums and villages. We have also started Parivartana, meaning transformation for recycling purposes. The environmental responsibility and climate action is taken up by the students of Christ University through Christites for Climate Action and Green Army. The fifth aspect of intellectual formation is all about the global exposure and cultural celebrations. And I would like to claim that every day is a multicultural celebration in our campuses and also in other colleges, Catholic colleges, because we give a lot of space for multicultural understanding and celebration, mixing students of all religions and all cultural backgrounds. Celebrations at the university reflect the rich and diverse culture of the nation, fostering an inclusive environment for students from various backgrounds across the country. The second aspect, the soul, the first point to reflect is all about deepening Christian faith. And we are very proud to say that we have a number of activities, initiatives under the banner of Association of Christian Christites. Christite is a term given to a student of Christ University, and this promotes fostering a deeper understanding of Christian faith and its experiences through mentoring for the students who are away from home and support to experience their Christian faith and share with others. Fostering interfaith dialogue, which is happening, as I said, in the inclusive environment we create in the university. Ecumenical services are also integrated to enhance the diverse spiritual experiences, promoting broader Christian community within the university. The chapels are open to congregations beyond the Catholic faith, fostering an atmosphere of inclusivity and religious harmony. Character formation. Christ University placing a strong emphasis on ethical leadership, social responsibility, and personal integrity through character formation initiatives. Let me give a wonderful example of how our university responded to the recent violence in the Christian-dominated tribal groups in India. And we were fortunate to get a chance to sponsor the education, the full sponsorship of the educational expenses of many of these Christian students from tribal communities who were alienated from their own native places. And we were proud that many of our faculty members were involved in it. The introduction of holistic education development classes facilitate the weekly interactions between students and faculty, addressing graduate attributes and moral uprightness. The mind. Addressing the mental well-being is a priority at Christ University, achieved through workshops and peer-to-peer support networks. The peer education system known as Preparing Students for Life exemplifies this commitment. Recognizing the significant role the peers play in the lives of young adults, the program equips peer educators to contribute to nurturing intimacy, friendship, and positivity, thereby building a holistic personality. Additionally, the university provides a dedicated center for counseling and health services, and the center operates with 2 wings, one focused on counseling and mentoring support, creating a safe and non-judgmental space, and the other providing basic health services and medical first aid. The holistic approach of Center for Health Services aims to foster mental well-being of students and staff and all the faculty members. To conclude, in the vibrant tapestry of Indian society, the universities and the Catholic colleges blends Catholic intellectual principles with deep engagement in Indian context. This unique educational experience aims to empower students not only as knowledgeable individuals, but also as compassionate citizens, responsible leaders, and engaged servants of faith and society. The commitment to Catholic intellectual tradition resonates in the university's values of holistic development, academic excellence, and social responsibility within the multicultural and multi-religious fabric of Indian society. Thank you.
Thank you, Father Joseph, for giving us really one inside view on Catholic intellectual tradition in India, in this part of the world, and how you at your university, how do you understand this Catholic tradition and how do you put it into practice? Probably as most of, let's say, Europeans, we are all struck by the fact that we know that it is present in Asian and African societies, even in South America, with such a big number of young people. For example, in my country, there is only 12 or 13% of the population under 25. And that's, I think, in general situation in Europe. And in India, other countries is over 50%. And this is really a challenge also for Catholic intellectual tradition, because we are thinking differently maybe in many ways, but I hope that we are acting all in the same way. Thank you once again.
Thank you.
At the last but not least, it's Professor Salim Dakash, Jesuit father, rector of St. Joseph University of Beirut from Lebanon. I think to many of us from IFCU, very, very familiar and very known personality. He completed a DA in philosophy at the University Panthéon-Sorbonne 1 under the direction of Etienne Balibar. And he's actually author of 2 theses. The first one is in philosophy and is entitled The Problem of the Creation of the World in the Kalam of Abu Mansur al-Makurdi and its historical and epistemological context. And his second thesis focuses on the pluralism of school system in Lebanon and was defended at the University of Strasbourg in 2016 under the supervision of Maurice Sachot. For 10 years, Father Salim Dakash has studied in depth the educational systems of Christians and Muslim schools, as well as public and private non-religious systems. He is the author of numerous works on the various fields of education and the meetings of cultures, and a specialist in themes relating to Syriac spirituality and studies in Islamic-Christian relations. In his work, he approaches the school as a social microcosm rather than a learning space. Indeed, the school system in Lebanon is considered as a community system which is sometimes accused of rejecting the other, sometimes seen as an embodiment of pluralism and the acceptance of differences. We know how challenging the situation in Lebanon is, especially today, and I'm sure that Father Salim, who is rector of St. Joseph University in Beirut since 2012, and who knows very well the situation not only in Lebanon, but also in Christian-Muslim dialogue, will give us his view on Catholic intellectual tradition. The floor is yours, Father.
Thank you, Father Rector. Ma principale référence pour parler de la tradition intellectuelle catholique au Moyen-Orient et dans nos universités, c'est un extrait de la lettre encyclique du pape Benoît XVI, de sa sainteté, regrettée. Et cette lettre a été donnée suite au synode pour les églises du Moyen-Orient en 2010. Et il dit dans le paragraphe 91 ce qui suit: « Étrangères à tout prosélytisme, les institutions éducatives catholiques d'enseignement supérieur au Moyen-Orient, au Liban, accueillent des étudiants d'autres églises et d'autres religions. étant d'inestimables instruments de culture pour la formation à la connaissance des jeunes, elle démontre de manière éclatante la possibilité qu'il y a au Moyen-Orient de vivre dans le respect et la collaboration, par une éducation à la tolérance et par une recherche continuelle de qualité humaine. Elles sont également, ces universités, attentives aux cultures locales qu'elles désirent promouvoir en soulignant les éléments positifs qu'elles contiennent. Et il termine en disant « J'appelle les responsables politiques au Liban et dans les pays du Moyen-Orient à appuyer ces institutions. » Je retiens de ce paragraphe de Sa Sainteté, Benoît XVI, 5 idées. La première, les universités catholiques sont étrangères à tout prosélytisme et à toute discrimination. Il suffit de regarder les chiffres. Les 3 universités catholiques de la région de Beyrouth, l'USJ, la Sagesse et les Antonins, accueillent plus de 40% de musulmans parmi leurs étudiants. Cette ouverture des universités catholiques est fondée sur la tradition intellectuelle catholique, intellectuelle et sociale, universitaire, qui veut que tout étudiant soit accueilli indépendamment de son origine religieuse ou ethnique. Cela est bien inscrit dans la charte de l'Université Saint-Joseph, qui dit que l'USJ, mon université, n'accepte pas d'être au service exclusif d'une classe sociale ou d'une communauté ethnique. Elle n'accepte pas non plus d'être asservie par une idéologie et entend sauvegarder sur son campus la liberté de l'information et du dialogue tant qu'elle ne porte pas atteinte à l'ordre public et aux activités d'enseignement. Appartenant à une société donnée, elle espère cependant en être le ferment. Fin de citation. C'est en effet un deuxième pilier de la tradition catholique qui est en jeu, celui de la liberté, du débat et de connaître, qui est à la base de cette attitude, s'agissant plus encore d'une liberté de la personne et de sa conscience. On sait bien que chez le cardinal Newman, le deuxième pilier de sa pensée, c'est la conscience, qui puisse juger et accueillir l'autre. Je pense que l'action de nos universités dans ce domaine a été déterminante pour que l'islam religieux d'Al-Azhar, sunnite, et même chiite par ailleurs, ait accepté en 2017 la liberté de la conscience, principe de toute citoyenneté. Mais cela est en même temps un défi, celui de conserver au plus moindre degré une identité catholique de l'université devant la demande d'étudiants musulmans d'avoir des lieux de prière, leur lieu de prière à l'intérieur de l'université. Et ce qu'on a fait, et communément, c'est de dire aux étudiants musulmans, vous pouvez prier dans un lieu qu'on vous désigne, mais on ne va pas installer des mosquées à l'université catholique. De même, au vu du pluralisme qui devient communautarisme et confessionnalisme politique et social, au vu aussi du manque d'espaces communs sociaux où une parole libre peut être prononcée, les universités en général, et en particulier les catholiques, sont des témoins vivants de respect des différences dans la collaboration, d'une éducation à la tolérance par une recherche continue de qualité humaine. À l'USJ, notre position est que le respect, la tolérance, le dialogue religieux sont des valeurs importantes, intrinsèques, mais il faut passer à une éducation à la citoyenneté, comme système de valeurs citoyennes, des devoirs et des droits communs à inculquer aux jeunes à travers un programme académique d'engagement social et citoyen de 30 crédits européens. Deuxième idée, les universités catholiques, nous dit le pape Benoît, sont des instruments de culture pour la formation intellectuelle des jeunes, doublée d'une formation à une éthique professionnelle. Il est connu que l'université catholique est un lieu privilégié du dialogue entre la foi et la culture et entre la foi et la raison. Il s'agit d'un exercice de tous les jours et un défi de taille pour tous les étudiants et les enseignants. Je me contente ici de dire que certains caractères de la tradition catholique marquent profondément notre attitude et notre éducation d'université catholique et jésuite en Orient face aux réalités terrestres. Ainsi, la conception de la transcendance divine, telle que le comprend la tradition catholique, est compatible avec la reconnaissance d'une autonomie des réalités de ce monde, comme le dit le Concile Vatican II, qui déclare ouvertement que les choses créées et les sociétés elles-mêmes ont leurs lois et leurs valeurs propres, que l'homme doit peu à peu apprendre à connaître, à utiliser, à organiser. Une telle exigence d'autonomie est pleinement légitime. Non seulement elle est revendiquée par les hommes de notre temps, mais elle correspond à la volonté du Créateur. Cette déclaration du Concile mène à donner à la personne humaine son rôle dans la connaissance et la formulation des règles, mais surtout à être responsable dans un monde oriental, chrétien et surtout musulman, qui demeure marqué par le magique, par la fatalité et par le déterminisme céleste. La foi donne des principes et des normes, la foi chrétienne, des normes de jugement moraux, des orientations d'action, mais il est évident que les solutions concrètes et immédiates aux problèmes quotidiens doivent reposer sur la capacité de compréhension et, je dis le terme, de discernement de personnel. Dans notre cas, il est indispensable, et ça, mon troisième idée, il est indispensable qu'il y ait une formation au discernement. Non seulement calculateur, mais une formation de la conscience morale au discernement. Celle-ci ne peut être sacrifiée par une réduction des programmes académiques à des objectifs d'efficacité ou à des compétences seulement techniques. Se trouvant dans un contexte pluraliste, une université de tradition catholique, sans renoncer à ce qui lui est propre, doit aller dans ce sens, former à la responsabilité au discernement. De même, la formation au discernement doit se faire dans toutes les disciplines, car il n'y a pas d'économie ou politique ou médecine catholique, mais il y a une pratique catholique de ces disciplines. De même, le rapport au savoir est au cœur du projet de l'Université catholique. La promotion humaine qu'elle vise ne se limite pas à l'acquisition d'une culture ou à la maîtrise d'une technique. D'après là, elle est ouverte aux questions fondamentales qui se posent à la conscience de tout homme, sur le sens ultime de sa vie. Cette ouverture est le chemin habituel vers la reconnaissance de Dieu, transcendant toutes les valeurs humaines, qui donne à la vie sa plénitude de sens et garantit la liberté humaine contre toute oppression. Ce rapport est en même un défi, et en même temps un défi. Cela tient au fait que la tendance dans notre région, peut-être plus chez les musulmans, à privilégier la mémoire, à tout ce qui est réflexion et jugement personnel, et surtout jugement critique, car la réussite de l'individu est mesurée par sa capacité de mémoriser par cœur les textes religieux ou littéraires, comme le Coran ou certaines parties de la Bible. Cela provient du fait de pouvoir exercer un esprit critique vis-à-vis des sujets étudiés. Ce qui a de la valeur, ce qui a été dit depuis tout temps et fait œuvre d'autorité immuable. Je me rappelle, je donne un exemple ici, la séance de soutenance de doctorat à l'UIJ. Et le doctorant, c'était un étudiant saoudien qui avait travaillé sur les hauts faits des compagnons du prophète en référence à Ibn Asakir, un historien musulman damascène du XIIe siècle. Dès que le premier membre du jury lui a reproché de ne pas avoir discuté les thèses erronées, entre guillemets, de l'auteur, l'étudiant traita le membre du jury d'impie et a quitté la salle. Et depuis, on n'a pas eu d'étudiants saoudiens dans notre université. Méthodologie, raisonnement et objectivité seront les procédés transversaux à acquérir pour mener une recherche pertinente dans un cadre de sincérité, de respect et de confiance, car il s'agit non pas de substituer un modèle occidental à un modèle local, mais à faire valoir l'exigence intellectuelle comme compétence à acquérir en se basant sur des textes propres au patrimoine musulman. Quatrième idée, les universités catholiques sont attentives aux cultures locales, dit le pape Benoît, et c'est un aspect majeur de l'exercice universitaire catholique depuis son éclosion au XIXe siècle et jusqu'à nos jours. Ainsi, l'héritage de nos universités dans le domaine de la conservation et de la promotion du patrimoine littéraire et intellectuel, à titre d'exemple, le patrimoine chrétien arabe et musulman, pour notre université, l'USJ, est colossal et peut être considéré comme un témoin majeur de ce que l'orientalisme ainsi que les différentes études sur le patrimoine, tant en Occident qu'en Orient, ont pu produire à la fin et au XXe siècle. Des noms comme des jésuites, Louis Cheikho, Henri Lamens, Camille Hacheim et Michel Allard, Louis Pouzet, Maurice Buige, Henri Flèche et bien d'autres jalonnent l'histoire de la pensée arabe et islamique. Dans le cadre de l'orientalisme, il s'agit d'une école pionnière de collecte de manuscrits, de leur découverte et d'éditions critiques qui ont donné aux textes des anciens une histoire, un tissu humain et social, et un rôle dans le mouvement de la Renaissance arabe. Dans d'autres universités, comme l'Université Saint-Esprit de Castille, la NDU, Notre-Dame University, chez les Antonins, on fait renaître une bonne partie de l'héritage syriaque liturgique et monastique. Et dans un moindre niveau, le patrimoine théologique a été revisité, édité et mis en relief. L'USJ travaille fortement sur l'héritage arabe chrétien, comme je l'ai dit. À l'Université de Bethléem, ce sont des différents éléments du patrimoine littéraire artistique palestinien qui ont été collectés et répertoriés. Cinquième point. Un grand défi s'est posé ces dernières années et en fait se pose depuis toujours concernant la responsabilité sociale de l'université et sur la nécessité de la transformation sociale et en quoi la tradition intellectuelle catholique peut aider dans ce domaine. Il s'agit ici d'ouvrir ses portes à tout demandeur de savoir et de diplôme. Et d'autre part, en quoi l'université peut aider à la transformation sociale et politique. Sinon être pionnière de ce changement, considérant la première question, le défi est important pour l'université catholique. Comment continuer et comment faire pour accueillir tout étudiant apte à suivre des études universitaires, mais qui n'a pas les moyens de payer ses crédits académiques semestriels ou annuels, au vu de la crise économique et sociale qui sévit depuis maintenant quelques années au Liban et au Proche-Orient. Aider quelqu'un est un acte de justice sociale au nom de l'Église. Pour conclure, je peux dire que nos universités, imprégnées de la tradition intellectuelle catholique, ont joué un rôle bien important dans la formation des compétences, mais aussi des personnes au service de leur avenir personnel, l'avenir de leur société et de leur Église. Les universités catholiques au Moyen-Orient portent le poids de causes humaines, spirituelles, politiques et sociales de taille. Ce sont des causes, ce sont des valeurs fondamentales qu'elles portent. Confirmer les chrétiens dans leur foi, mener le combat pour la citoyenneté, les combats pour la justice comme pour la Palestine, pour le développement social et travailler pour sortir des crises. Elles vivent de nos jours le défi de continuité de leur mission éducative qui contribue à la formation du capital humain qui fait notre fierté dans le monde. Ainsi se pose la question, avec l'émigration continue des chrétiens du Liban et du Moyen-Orient dans des pays proches ou lointains, l'université catholique et les universités en général ne risquent-elles pas de se retrouver avec une minorité de chrétiens et son unité catholique se trouve menacée. Mais comptant sur Dieu et sur les amis et sur les anciens de nos universités nous sommes toujours debout pour continuer notre mission qui est d'annoncer le Christ et de relever notre tradition intellectuelle catholique. Merci beaucoup de votre attention.
Father Rector, thank you very much, especially, I would say, for your testimony of what Catholic University in Lebanon are doing in these very difficult times and challenging times for whole society in Lebanon. We pray for that, and I'm sure that you know that IFCU and all the members of our federation are very close to you and to your university, and thank you for giving us this view on the role of the Catholic intellectual tradition in these different 5 principles at your universities, which is also inspiring for all of us. So once again, thank you. So we are running out of time, but we started a little bit later, so I think we have 15 more minutes for discussions, because we started at 2:30, and it's 1.5 hours. I think that the organizer will allow us to have 15 minutes of discussion. I will renounce on my questions. I just would like to ask our speakers, do they have something to add to their own contribution, or do they have a question to each other at this very moment? If not, then I would like to go to the floor. The floor is yours. I think we had really 4 challenging and very interesting speakers and teams. So please, the floor is yours. Yeah, everybody wants coffee, but no, not immediately. If you don't have, yes. So please.
I would simply like.
Because of translation, please. Yeah, okay.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. It was a beautiful panel going from where I learned to speak about Catholic intellectual tradition was in the United States, actually, and then coming to a rather text-oriented approach to the very practical daily life of countries that are facing challenges that are completely unknown to me in everyday life. So, but I was listening to the point when you were speaking at the beginning. The Catholic intellectual tradition is not a doctrinal tradition. I would challenge this. I would really challenge it, because we get a new kind of what we understand of theology here. And this is doctrinal, which means we focus on different things. And here, what you were speaking in Lebanon and in India, this is also developing doctrine through the praxis that you are doing. And this is something that Pope Francis was also stressing, and certain theologians tell him that he's too Marxist with that. But I would like to hear some more about this link between intellectual tradition and doctrinal tradition that you separated, and that I would find very strongly linked in the daily lives and in the programs of the university that our colleagues from Lebanon and from India were presenting to us, and for which I'm very grateful. Thank you very much indeed.
So thank you very much. I'm not panelist, but I'm very happy that my thesis has such a great reaction. But I just have to, a little bit to justify, I didn't say, exactly speaking, that they are separated. I said they are connected, but they are different. And I stay, but I'm not going to explain that. But I think that we all understood there is a connection, but there is a difference. But maybe it's a good topic to the panelists. Maybe they want to add something to that, or to challenge you. Yes.
You made the claim. You've got to defend it.
No, but I'm not a panelist. Okay, that's okay.
Yeah, okay. So maybe from our context, one aspect which I tried to focus was a dialogue between different cultures and how on a daily basis, every day is a multicultural celebration, and through which we are, that's purposely done, we are, let's say, bringing down the differences based on religion. And in our country, it's very true that even now the differences in among the castes is very strong, especially in the rural, even in urban areas. So purposely we design activities, intellectual related workshops and seminars so that students are able to understand each other and accept each other. So there are lots of our students who go beyond religion, and some of them are not bothered about what's the religion that you practice, but you relate to others, you understand and accept them. So that interdependence is promoted through cultural activities and also beyond that. We have, that in the Indian context, subcultures, each of the states are best of examples of that. So we bring cultural activities like of music, of theater, of dance to the different activities of the university. That's how we prepare our students to accept each other, to understand and celebrate the cultural diversity of our country. And we found there is a lot of acceptance for that model. And students love the campus life because of their possibility of reaching out to citizens of other subcultures or other languages. And we have lots of languages spoken all around India. But in our campus, it's mostly English, but there are also activities organized through Indian languages, which is also well accepted to the students. I think that's one thing. Second aspect is how ex-Cordier was speaking about truth, but in its real sense, the service and social justice, which we promote in our campuses. We feel that the Christian sense of reaching out to the needy or to the other can be easily practiced without naming this is the quote from Bible or other things. But the base of that is our Christian teaching. But the students understand it, and one of our core values is social responsibility, which we give a lot of avenues for students to practice. I hope I am able to answer. It's a little long. Thank you. You are free to ask more questions on these.
Thank you very much, Father Rector. Do you want to add something? Joseph, can you switch? Okay.
Thank you. En fait, ce que je peux dire à propos, disons, de la situation au Proche-Orient, au Moyen-Orient, c'est que nous sommes en crise et même, disons, le dialogue théologique et doctrinal entre islam et christianisme est en crise aussi. Il est quelque part, disons, suspendu. On n'avance pas. Sauf peut-être, disons, justement, sur des questions comme la citoyenneté, comme la fraternité, Abu Dhabi, le Caire, etc. Mais dans notre philosophie telle que je l'ai expliquée, et c'est, je pense, disons, une philosophie qui est fondée sur des points doctrinaux. La personne, la suprématie de la personne humaine, ça c'est catholique, ça, c'est pas musulman. La conscience et la fondamentalité de la conscience, ça c'est doctrinal, ça, c'est pas quelque chose de... Mais ce que je peux dire, disons, ce que j'ai dit, disons, comment nous, disons, dans notre exercice quotidien, on essaie quand même de faire passer le message, vous voyez. À propos, par exemple, de cette crise, disons, dans le dialogue islamo-chrétien, au Liban, on a essayé le 25 mars d'avoir une fête commune de la Vierge. Vous le savez peut-être. Mais tant que de point de vue catholique, hiérarchie catholique, que de point de vue musulman, il y a peut-être, disons, les trois quarts qui ne sont pas d'accord. Parce que, et pour le musulman, la Sainte Vierge, dans l'imaginaire musulman, représente quelque chose, et dans le catholicisme, c'est autre chose. Mais on insiste pour qu'il y ait quelque chose de commun. D'où, disons, la recherche d'un travail sur les valeurs communes, sur ce qui est commun entre nous, vous voyez. Et à ce niveau-là, oui, à l'université, on travaille beaucoup sur ce qui est commun. Sinon, disons, on va aller de plus en plus vers, disons, une crise et une mécompréhension, une situation qui n'avance pas. De ce fait, je pense que, d'une part, nous sommes conscients tout à fait de ce qui est doctrinal, de ce qui est tradition intellectuelle, et on le met en avant dans la pratique, et d'autre part, disons, on est conscient aussi qu'il y a une grande crise, et il ne faut pas, disons, tomber dans le piège de la crise. Voilà.
Thank you very much. Is there any other question? Please, Father.
Thank you very much for your exposition, and very inspiring indeed. I come from a Catholic university as well, and we talk about the dialectical relationship between faith and reason. And I don't know, between you, which moderates the other? Is it the faith that moderates reason, or the reason moderates faith? That has been a continuous discussion in my university. Thank you.
I think that's all around the world, continuing discussion, but do you want to answer to that? Please, Stephen.
You raise a question which I think all too often can be characterized as positing some kind of opposition between them. The image that John Paul II, or Fisichella or Ratzinger, whoever came up with that sentence, posits is of wings on a bird, an image drawn from the wing. Wings don't direct one another. They're directed by something else. My inclination would be to say that they don't direct one another, that neither the one has a priority over the other, but in fact, perhaps they operate in such a way that our telos, our final cause, regulates, at least in the healthy functioning reason and healthy faith, regulates that movement towards the divine.
So, thank you very much. Somebody else? Please, Professor Miller.
May I just add to the same point? I think if the two are not connected, something is going wrong. You know, faith, we cannot talk about faith unless we talk about it, and that is already applying reason. And we cannot talk about our reason if we do not have our heart speaking, as we have heard today very often, you know, and our faith. So I think this is a wrong opposition. And if you look back, sometimes faith needs to help reasoning, and this is what we experience, I think, in how you live in your universities. Faith gives the strength to open up to people who are different, who might question ourselves, who are different. This needs a lot of energy. I mean, this is really something very special, to be able to open up, to accept others also while they are different. We will never be the same, nobody. And I think this is a challenge for our lives, and also in dialogue with other people and people of other faiths. And sometimes faith needs the help of reason. We have discovered that with the human rights, the church was so reluctant for such a long time against human rights. So, and we know that we need them to defend on a legal basis what we talk about of human dignity of every human being. So there are times when we need reason to help faith and times when we need faith to help reason.
I think those thoughts and considerations are the best way to conclude our session. So once again, I would like to thank our speakers for their presentations. To all of you in this really time for coffee that you really stayed with us and you were interested into this topic. I wish you all the best and God bless you. And I hope, as a program says, that we are going to see each other by next roundtable of the future of the Catholic universities. There is no written where is the place. I don't know if here or another, but we will know that. So now coffee break. Thank you once again. Thank you. Thank you.